Annie Rogers, and on behalf of the Attitude team, I'd like to thank you for joining us for today's ADHD Experts presentation titled Build Your ADHD Emotional Resilience, Strategies for Adults Who Feel Things Deeply. For many adults with ADHD, emotional dysregulation is one of the most impairing aspects of the ADHD experience. Intense feelings, mood shifts, irritability, outsized anger, rejection-sensitive dysphoria, these all cause problems with daily functioning, with friends and family, with colleagues at work, and beyond. Here, we will focus on learning strategies to minimize the damage that runaway emotions can cause to others and to ourselves. In this webinar, we will learn how to monitor emotions and express them in healthy ways. We'll also look at how to improve emotional resilience and bounce back from those outbursts. Leading today's presentation is Dr. Tamara Rosier. Dr. Rosier is the founder of the ADHD Center of West Michigan, where she and her staff work with individuals with ADHD and their families to learn strategies and develop new skills to live effectively with ADHD. Dr. Rosier is also the president of the ADHD Coaches Organization, ACO. Her book, Your Brain's Not Broken, discusses strategies for managing the emotional aspects of ADHD. Before I hand over the microphone to Dr. Rosier, I have just a few housekeeping items. Those of you tuned into the live webinar may download the slides now by clicking on the Event Resources section of your webinar screen. And if you are interested in the Certificate of Attendance option, look for instructions in the email you will receive about an hour after the live broadcast. If you are listening in replay or podcast mode, visit attitudemag.com and search podcast 388 to access the slides, the webinar replay, and the Certificate of Attendance option. If you support the work we're doing here at Attitude to strengthen the ADHD community, we encourage you to visit attitudemag.com/subscribe to sign up for Attitude Magazine for your family or to share with a teacher or loved one who could benefit from greater ADHD understanding. Finally, the sponsor of this week's webinar is Inflow. Inflow is the #1 app to help you manage your ADHD. Developed by leading clinicians, Inflow is a science-based self-help program based on the principles of cognitive behavioral therapy. You can click right in the slide to download Inflow now on the App Store or Google Play Store. Attitude thanks our sponsors for supporting our webinars. Sponsorship has no influence on speaker selection or webinar content. So without further ado, I am so pleased to welcome Dr. Rosier. Thank you so much for joining us today and for leading this discussion on big emotions.
Thanks, Annie. Thanks for having us today. And us, I mean the royal we, I guess. I meant me. Hey, welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here today. Odds are you're here because you've realized that we spend a lot of time talking about really how to plan, how to organize, how to structure ourselves. But really, many of us are struggling with big emotions. And our big emotions can cause big problems. And so I really today just want to set aside all the executive function stuff and really talk about how do we hone in on emotional health. So many of you are here today and you already know that the ADHD brain feels like it's set up for overreactions. And I can't hear any of you, can't see any of you, but I could almost hear many of you go, that's right, that's true. And that's because our brain gets confused between what's a big deal and what's a small deal. And we know this through research that the ADHD brain has big feelings and emotions. That's not what today's talk is about. But if you check out Tom Brown's work, Russ Ramsey, um, Russell Barkley, all those guys are talking about how the brain is kind of set up for overreactions. But today we are going to be talking about building emotional resilience. And this, I believe, is a key part to having an emotionally healthy life. Now, I have ADHD. I'm an ADHD coach. I run the ADHD center, so I'm surrounded by ADHD all the time. And I can only do this work when my own emotional balance is appropriate. And so I want to encourage all of you that you gain resilience by practicing resilience. And research clearly supports the more we use this is like a muscle, we can do it. And so let me start by explaining what resilience is. It's your ability to respond to stressful or unexpected situations in an emotionally healthy way. And I'll take that apart in a second, but something lovely happened this morning. I was working with a client, and when I say lovely, this wasn't great news for her. She was having a difficult time at work. And during our call today, she said, well, I was put on an improvement plan. And I want you to remember that this is she's young, but she's smart. She's a go-getter. She's driven, perfectionistic, and she's put on an improvement plan. And that was soul crushing for her. But the reason I say this was a lovely thing is she's been practicing her resilience for a very long time. And so we talked about how she felt the big waves of emotions come over her, but she knew what to do when she felt them. And that's an example of resilience. And that's why, actually, even though this was kind of a bad thing that happened earlier in the week, we celebrated. We actually celebrated her resilience. Oh, and by the way, she hates her job and really has been wanting a way out of it anyway. So we celebrated her resilience. We celebrated that she felt the big emotions and she made sense of the big emotions and was able to carry on. So today we're going to be talking about these things: healthy emotional beliefs, identify a pattern of your emotional outburst, managing strong emotion, recovery and repair, and then living a daily balance. I can't do justice to any of these topics in 45 minutes. But what my hope today is I can start to create thoughts in you that you will want to further explore. And hopefully you're going to be curious enough to go, hey, I really wonder what she means about this. So that's my goal for today. Now, I've told you my goal for today. I'd like for you, if you are listening with a pen and paper in front of you, I would love for you to jot down, what's one thing that I'm hoping to get out of today? If you're driving, don't do that. But I'm going to pause just a second and for you just to kind of set an intention, like, why am I even at this session today? Okay, because silence is awkward, especially in recordings. I'm going to keep moving. But as you're listening, I want you to keep thinking, what is it that I'm hoping to get out of today? So we're going to start with healthy beliefs. And here's what I mean. Emotionally resilient people, they don't project their feelings. They don't blame others for their emotions, and they don't shame themselves. Now, I was talking with a client a couple months ago about these basic things. And she just looked at me and said, then what are my options? Because that's all that she knew what to do with emotions. And if you're viewing the slide, you see that I have a big wave because emotions come in big waves. So here's what emotionally resilient people do. They have healthy emotional beliefs and they're self aware. They take responsibility for their emotions. They take responsibility for their actions caused by their big emotions. They empower themselves to learn and to grow, and they practice, practice, practice. By the way, practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent. And so we really want to be very careful what we believe about emotions. So here's a few basic beliefs about emotions. Emotions aren't good or bad. They just inform us. I often ask my clients to imagine someone tapping on their shoulder saying, excuse me, this is anxiety, and I'd like to tell you that we're nervous about this. Anger doesn't do any tapping. Anger just kind of whips us out of the way and says, excuse me, I need to take over. But emotions, even that emotion is trying to tell us something. And so I really teach my clients to be curious about their emotions. Emotions inform us, and sometimes the information is useful, and sometimes it's not. Emotions can feel too big. We can feel swept away by our big emotions. But I want you to know you can handle them. One of the biggest emotions I've had to work with as a coach is with a client who lost a child. And that is, I have to just be honest, that is the worst fear I have. And I can't even imagine the level of sadness and despair that she feels. And she said to me, Tamara, this is too much for me. I can't bear this emotion. And that was the only time that this challenged my belief, because I kept saying, but I know you can handle the emotion. I know you can handle it. And so we talked about letting things wash over her as she grieved. Her grief is not done. It's not going to be done. This happened several years ago, and it's still with her, but we teach her to release it. And so that's the biggest, scariest emotion I can think about. So later today, when you're irritated because you can't find your phone for the third time and you feel that big emotion swelling, I know that you can handle that one. I know you can do that. So the next belief is emotions will pass. You don't need to act on them. I'm just going to say that again because I feel like my own ADHD brain needs to hear that. Emotions will pass, and I don't need to act on them. The emotional brain is geared, and I won't go into the neurology of it, but we have an action-oriented system when it comes to emotions. I feel this, therefore I will do this. And when we actually believe, like, I have this emotion, I don't need to act on it, all of a sudden we're allowed to feel it, but I don't need to do something about it. All right, so now moving on. Now we're going to go to identify the pattern. And when you identify the pattern, you're just kind of thinking about, well, do I tend to do this or this? So today I'm just going to give you two choices, but I'm positive there's more choices out there. But for today, we're going to keep it simple. So are you the hurler? Which means you take big emotions and you just hurl them at anyone or anything around. Also known as the fire breather. You don't really need to admit this to anyone else, but if you know this is you, I want you to know that you probably hurt people with your emotions. You probably are doing damage that you don't understand to relationships. So we really want to slow down and think about that. Now, some of you guys aren't hurlers all the time. Some of you are hiders, aka shame eaters. So you take all these big emotions and you shove them down inward. And all that anger that you feel, oh no, you're not fire breathing it. You're just putting it all down inside. And many times, these people will have stomach and digestive issues because they're taking all the emotional energy and instead of spewing it, they just cram it all down. By the way, the hurlers, uh, they report to me that they're like, yeah, I lost my stuffings about this, but, it felt good and now I'm over it. And they feel good after they project all their emotions out. The shame eaters or the hiders are the ones that just keep on torturing themselves. So, as we're moving through this, I want you to notice the patterns. When are you a fire breather or a hurler? When are you a hider? Some people will tell me that they're a hider. I'll just keep shoving those emotions way down, and then something happens, and then all of a sudden I'm a hurler. That's a very common pattern I see. Growing up, I was taught that no one could handle my big emotions, and so I became a hider. I went to the point of going, well, I just shouldn't have emotions. Big emotions aren't okay, and so I just won't have them. So whatever your emotional story here is, we've got to figure out the pattern. So what is your big emotional tell? And we need to learn to listen for that cue. So here's what I mean by a big emotional tell. By the way, this is just free, quick advice. ADHD people should never play poker. Why? Because we carry everything on our face. Just free side advice. But the tells in poker give us away. And so we think, one of my daughters thinks she has such a great poker face. It's all right there on her face. She can tell everything. So an emotional tell is kind of like a poker tell, except to yourself. So it's something that you telegraph how you're feeling or what you're thinking. And so some people feel it in their bodies. One of my clients says he feels like a burning kind of in his esophagus. Another person says she feels like a shiver of a big emotion. And many of my clients will have like different bodily feelings for different big emotions. All right, I'm just going to share with you because I've already shared a lot today, but I'm going to tell you my big emotional tells. When I'm angry, it is like I hear, oh, heck no. And when I hear that in my head, I have to think, okay, Tamara, stand down. You're ready to fight. Don't do this. Calm down. And I've taught myself if I do that, then that's my emotional tell. Stand down, Tamara. Don't listen to that emotion. Don't go after the fight mode. Now, some of you are saying, oh, hold up. You just said you were a hider. Yeah, for the most part, right? But then every once in a while, something will still click and I could go into a hurling mode. And so that's why we really need to understand what are our big emotional tells. So when a big emotion is cropping up in you, what is it that you start to feel? And I'm hoping that you're playing along at home right now and you're actually answering these questions out loud. Maybe no one's around and you can talk out loud, but even if you're in a crowded subway, anyway, subways aren't crowded anymore. No matter where you are, I hope you're playing along and answering these questions for yourself so that you can figure out, how do I know when I'm ready to have a big emotion or that one is starting to create a wave inside me? All right. Managing strong emotions. So a lot about what emotional resilience is what do we do when we get these huge, strong emotions? How do we manage this? I told you that, I became a hider because I was afraid that if I let out those strong emotions, no one will like me, no one will love me, I'll be rejected. I think many of you out there might have come to those same false beliefs. So, how do we respect the big emotions and manage them without and letting them out without hurting anyone? So, emotions are really a form of energy. There's a Harvard study that came out 2 years ago that really started to talk about emotions as a form of energy. If it's a form of energy, it means it's like a wave. Waves are energy, right? Uh, Look for the healthy way to let that energy out. And when we think of emotions as a form of energy, so it originates in our brain, washes through our body, and that's when we have to figure out, how do I let this energy go? One of my clients, she's in her 50s. She went to the doctor because her hands were hurting so badly. And pretty much the hand specialist explained to her, I think you're clenching your fist at night. And she saw the hand specialist, saw me in the same day, and she's like, this can't be true. I'm not clutching. I said, well, let's just try it out. And so she taped her knuckles so that she couldn't clench in the middle of the night. And sure enough, her hands felt better. Well, that's great, but that's still not releasing. What she was doing in the middle of the night is taking all that anger and frustration she felt about herself and others, her work, whatever, and just clenching it into her fist. By the way, she was a hider. And so just taping her knuckles so that she couldn't clench her fist wasn't enough. She had to find a way to actually let the energy out. So I'm grateful that she learned that from her hand doctor so that she could come in and we could talk about ways that she could build her emotional resilience and actually let the wave pass. The other thing I'd like for you to really think about is we have to make a plan to release the emotion before it happens. Because we have to think and be able to predict enough that when I hear the, oh, heck no, I'm like, oh, Tamara, that's your big emotion, anger. And then I have to figure out, what are my options? So I'm going to suggest that we find our catharsis. Catharsis is an old word. I started my career out as an English teacher, and so English teachers like to talk about catharsis, but it goes back to the Greeks, and the Greeks used to go to theater for an emotional catharsis, and catharsis means letting something out. And so they would go to a play and they'd watch this ancient play about murder, intrigue, and they got really nasty, these old plays. And people would be so engulfed with the emotion that they'd cry, they'd be angry, and it would let out their emotions. And this is an emotional management technique. So sometimes, I know some of you already find your own little catharsis, and I'd like to pause here and think, what ways that you do you use to already let out your emotions? And just note those a quick second. I'm going to give you a couple, but odds are you already have a healthy way to let out your emotions. All right. So here are a couple ways. Breathe. Breathing sounds so cliche. People are like, just breathe. But when you actually take time, and I suggest my clients sit up and they push their shoulders back and they take a deep breath. What that breath is doing for you is it's sending a signal to your brain that you can't possibly be in danger. Because if you were in danger, you wouldn't have time to breathe like that. And then release muscles with the next breath. So there's a lot of breathing techniques. I personally like the box breathing technique. Inhale for 5, hold for 5, exhale for 5, hold that for 5, and you just keep doing the box. There are so many other breathing techniques, and you guys have access to Google. So if you hear a catharsis today that you don't know about, just jump on down that rabbit hole and do some research. The next catharsis is, and this is just a catharsis for just this low level anxiety that you feel or a frustration. It's usually, I use this one or suggest people use this when people are frustrated at their computers. So again, we sit up straight. And so sitting up straight means popping your tailbone out. Don't sit in a curved. And you sit up straight and start to relax the shoulders. Again, you're sending a signal to the brain, hey folks, we're really okay here. It's just an email. So vomit words safely. Some of us are verbal processors. Some of us, if we can just spout out words, and that's just going to be enough for us. The key here is we have to do it safely. So I have 3 dogs. I love them. Don't have grandkids yet. So instead of being all bitter about that, I'm going to, treat my dogs as grandchildren right now. So there's times I'll want to talk to, I'll just want to vomit words. And so I say to one of my dogs, okay, Gracie, here's why I'm so mad. And she looks and she tilts her head and she really tries to follow because she's a very smart dog and she knows enough words. But then watching her tilt her head, I'm like, oh, this isn't probably as bad as I thought. I use the vomit words technique with many of my clients. One female with whom I was coaching, she worked it so that she could call a friend and say, permission to vomit. And the friend would go, granted. And then she would just go, can you believe this? And she would just rant. And the deal was the friend would not interrupt. The friend wouldn't do anything. The friend would just listen. And then my client would say, vomit over. And then the friend would say, what do you need from me about that? And it's interesting. My client came back. She said, what's weird? Once I get it all out, it's out. And usually she doesn't need to say much else to me. And so she thanks her friend and hangs up. And that's a wonderfully safe friendship for her to do. But notice the agreement was made ahead of time, right? Both of those people, they met at a camp. And so I guess they're kind of relying on permission to vomit. Granted, was like their kind of secret language from their camp experience. So they built on the relationship to allow this person to let the emotions out. Make noises. Gosh, that sounds weird, doesn't it? Making noise is a way to release emotions. And if you think about it, we already do it naturally. Something happens, we groan, or we grumble. So I'm asking you to do it on purpose. I had a client who had a hard time acknowledging her emotions. So vomiting words wasn't going to work for her. Breathing wasn't enough for her. And so I just encouraged her to lie on her bed when she was very frustrated or whatever big emotion came up. Just lie in the bed and just make whatever noise she wanted. And she texted me. She's like, I'm so glad I was at home, because she just started out with this kind of feeling. And then it just kind of grew into like this loud, she called it an animal sound. And so now her catharsis is to make this animal sound. And she says it's like part growl, part yell, and it would scare anyone that she knew. But she's letting it out in a healthy way. All my clients who are using these weird kind of techniques, they're actually gaining emotional balance as they let the emotions out. Cry or yell, oldies, oldie but good one. Yelling, remember, the whole thing is we're not trying to hurt anyone or anything. So if you go hiking and want to yell into a pillow, yelling at someone clearly has to be out of bounds. Move your body. I used this technique when I was working on my dissertation. It was really a hard part of my life. I was working full time. I had a newborn, and I would get so overwhelmed and confused, and all the big emotions just started swelling, and all the doubt, imposter syndrome, everything that was just kind of haunting me. And so, about 9 o'clock each night, I live in the north, so in the summer, 9 o'clock is still light. Uh, in the summer, I would go for a run, and I would run up this big hill, and the hill goes up for about 3/4 of a mile. And I would be crying, and I'd be arguing with the hill. You're not going to beat me today. Not today, hill. Not today. And so moving my body was a way to kind of start to release the emotion. I wasn't trying to make sense of the emotion. I was only just releasing. And in catharsis, by the way, this isn't deep meditative stuff. This is just releasing the energy. Another technique I love is tapping techniques. For those of you who don't know about tapping, check out EFT. You can type in tapping techniques. But that is really something to research for yourself. Tapping, the research on this says, hey, it works. We don't know why it works exactly, but it does work. So many of my clients have had incredible success releasing, especially the quieter emotions like sorrow, fear, failure. All those kinds of quiet ones that just kind of creep up and go, "Hey, you're not good enough." That would be a good catharsis for relieving those emotions. And the last one is self-havening. If you haven't found self-havening, it's actually a wonderful thing to do. It's usually called for as a catharsis when your emotions are so big that you're actually so distracted by them that your head and your body start to argue. And the goal there is to bring back your head and your body. So look into self-havening techniques. They're very, very simple. And they're incredibly good to kind of get your whole body back together. This is where I would love to pause and say, any questions so far? But it is a good point to rest here and say, if you've heard of any techniques that you're like, wow, I really want to learn more, jot that down. Because something I know about the ADHD brain, we're curious. And we're really curious. And Google can be a friend or an enemy, depending on what time of day. But we can really get into things and learn about things. All right. Recovery and repair. So, one of the biggest problems my clients have is in the area of recovery and repair. I was just working with someone who she has a quick mouth, quick-witted, but that doesn't really work for her because at work, she says very passive-aggressive and snide comments. And what happens is she has these big emotions sitting in her cubicle, and instead of being aware of them and letting them out in a healthy way, they come out in sarcastic, snide remarks. What she doesn't realize is that she has got to take responsibility and she has to seek repair when that happens. Now, to be clear about sarcasm, I'm very sarcastic. It only takes you spending just a few minutes with me to realize, oh, wow, she's super sarcastic. But sarcasm should never be directed at anyone. When it's directed at someone, that's when it becomes very hurtful. Or as one of my kids' teachers used to call it, Satan's scissors. We don't want it when it's directed towards people, it becomes Satan's scissors. So what we need to do is we need to think about repair. So when a comment comes out that isn't nice, or when you flip your lid or lose your stuffings, whatever the big emotions happen and you let it out and you're like, oops, that wasn't a healthy catharsis. You need to go through and think, who or what did my big emotions affect and what needs to happen to repair? Now, I need you to avoid the temptation just to move on. I work with this in families. I do a lot of family coaching. And all the time, families are like, oh, can we just move on from that? Maybe that just didn't matter that much. And we're missing an opportunity to repair and to strengthen relationships. And so I always talk about two questions. Who or what did my big emotions affect? What needs to happen to repair? Especially hurlers, by the way. Hurlers, you guys are really bad at repair because you're like, I don't know what their problem is. I feel better. Meanwhile, you just left someone else in a puddle on the floor because you yelled at them for an hour. So who or what needs to be repaired? For you folks who are hiders, guess what? Guess who needs the repair after you lose your stuffings? You did the damage to yourself. And so in that case, you have to figure out how to repair this. You really cannot keep going on just shaming yourself and just creating this, or feeding this self-loathing voice. It's not okay. And so after you, let's go back to that earlier client this morning who she was so upset because she was placed on an improvement plan. She had a big emotion. She started to take it inside, started to really like, well, this is what you do. You're stupid. You're wrong. I hate you. Her repair had to be about, are those beliefs true about myself? Am I feeding a shame monster that I just shouldn't be feeding anymore? What do I need to do to repair this in myself? And really, because of her understanding how to repair, that's why she could rebound, and it's why she could be so resilient when she was put on that improvement plan. Okay. Lastly, we want to talk about daily balance. Okay. When I talk about doing anything daily, I want to remind you, I have ADHD. Everything daily, like daily exercise, every day I try to exercise. I'm like, whoa, this is a new experience every day. How do I do this? So I understand that when I say daily, many of you are like, oh, I don't know if I could do this daily. But I am saying this is as important as good diet or exercise. Now, having said that, we can find ways for you to do the daily balance, but this takes an awareness step and a commitment to say, I am going to do the daily balance. So there's a lot of things you can do. You can take frequent assessments of your emotional state. When people are first learning this, I suggest they set an alarm at 8 a.m. or whenever you want to start your day. And you just kind of rate your emotions. And by the way, I'm not into the naming the emotions. Here I'm talking about naming the intensity of the emotions. And then I ask them to return to that around their lunchtime, which reminds them to eat anyway. Then they return and they're, again, looking at the intensity of their emotions for the day and just noting anything that might come up And then as they close up the day, to kind of look again, like how emotionally, how am I feeling? Uh, I actually still use this technique on days that I don't get enough sleep. Every once in a while, just for one thing or another, for one reason or another, I just don't have a good night's sleep. I try hard, but it just doesn't happen. I know on those days, I have to be very careful because I'm at risk for high intensity emotions. And so I kind of put myself on alert. And I set 3 alarms that day, and they're to check in with myself. Because I find if I don't, I will be sitting in a meeting of people I really like and love. But I'll be sitting in the meeting going, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. Oops, I'm not emotionally managed right now. And notice I just will project it out to it's their fault, their fault, their fault. But when I take the emotional assessment in the morning, I'm like, hey, Tamara, you need to be careful today because you have high emotions. So how about we just not trust every emotion that's coming in right now? You're tired. Same goes for hungry, right? Hungry emotions really can't be trusted. So the next thing I want you to think about as we find our daily balance is find your system to rank emotional intensity. So in my book, I use the number system 1 for low intensity, high for 10, or 10 for high intensity. ADHD folks are really known for being 1 or 10. We tend not to just rest at 5 like our neurotypical counterparts do. We tend to be big or small. And you guys know that already. So using that number line can help you kind of go, oh, I'm feeling this at a 7 right now, or I'm feeling this at a 10. Holy cow, I need to do a catharsis first before I try to think this through. Some of my clients and I come up with a color system. Um, Usually the color system, I think one of my clients, I forget, it was a couple years ago now, she goes, it's like the terrorist warning system. And she was kind of making a joke that her emotions can be terrorist sometimes. And so she had red for be very, very careful. Your emotions could hijack you at any time. And then orange was, hey, we're getting at high alert, so we're going to be careful. We're going to move slowly through emotions today. And then they went all the way down to green. And that was her way of understanding how her emotions fluctuated during the day. And the alert system helped her kind of calm down. She was also verbally quick. So calm down her intense verbal reactions to others. So whatever you do, I want you to find a way to measure your emotional intensity. The other daily practice that I recommend, and I write about this, Cam Gott and I came up with the ADHD emotional health ladder, and I write about it in my book. The emotional health ladder, it will help you understand like how emotionally health are you, and it considers your ADHD. So the benefit of that is it says if you have this kind of symptom, then this is maybe where you are in the emotional ladder. One of my coaches was telling me that she used the emotional health ladder that morning. She was getting ready for work, coming into the office, and she looked down and she's missing a button. And for those of you with ADHD, mornings, getting out of the house, getting dressed, I mean, that is complicated stuff happening. And she was ready to flip her lid over it. Instead, she said, well, I had just reviewed the emotional health ladder. And I thought to myself, hold up. I don't want to get unhealthy just because I lost a button. Okay, if I don't want to do that, where do I want to be on the emotional health ladder? And so she found a way to measure the emotional intensity, but then choose where she wanted to be. And that's really the key for us is as we're practicing this resilience, we need to choose where we want to be on the level of intensity. Now, as we're wrapping up, I want to be clear about a couple things. There is freedom when we manage emotions. We get more freedom and we get more power, and we're empowered to kind of think more clearly and act better. I want to be very clear, though. What I'm not saying is emotions are bad. Emotions aren't bad. They tell us things. But how we release emotions can be quite dangerous. And so I really want to encourage us. They can be dangerous, right, to others or ourselves or inanimate objects even. So I want to encourage us, how can we figure out a way to accept? If you have ADHD, you're people with big emotions. And we don't have to be ashamed, but we can do is learn to become much more emotionally resilient. All right, I think we're ready for questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Rosier. There are many questions, so I will jump right in. One, backing up a little bit to the beginning, you talked about having healthy emotional beliefs as a trademark of emotionally resilient people. Can you offer any mantras or sayings that we can repeat to ourselves out loud or otherwise to sort of reinforce what a healthy emotional belief might be?
Yeah, so this usually takes a lot of work. When I'm working with clients, this takes a lot of work to kind of get to what are emotionally healthy beliefs, what are unhealthy beliefs. And I shared with you an unhealthy belief I had growing up was, Tamara, your emotions are too big. No one should ever see them, right? So I started with unhealthy belief, and then I say, well, if that's my unhealthy belief, what would be my healthy belief? And so, no, I'm not going to give you a mantra, but what I am going to do is say, think through what are some beliefs you have that really are unhealthy. And and sometimes your mantra or your personal thing would be, I let it go. I let it go. But I encourage you to come up with your own words so that you can start to teach yourself. Having said that, I will tell you two of mine is I take a deep breath in, and as I let the air out, I'm just like letting it go. And I started that after I saw Frozen, Elsa, let it go, let it go. And I thought, wow, that's just really a great way to look at this. The other thing I do is I swipe my hand as if I'm dismissing the emotion. Swipe, move on. And so it's like, I don't want to date that emotion right now. And so I swipe it. And that actually, remember, my hand is moving. And so it's letting energy out. And I do that. If you watch me working at my computer, you'll see me swipe my hand like, nope, critical. I don't have time for that right now because I don't need that.
Okay. We have a tough one here. There are a lot of parents and spouses who are listening in order to help their loved ones. And the pattern that I'm seeing is that their loved ones are hurlers who tend to blame others. So the challenge, of course, is how do you initiate helping someone who doesn't necessarily recognize that they need that help?
Oh, yes. Okay. So this is a hard one, guys. And thanks for understanding that it's really hard. I'm going to attempt to answer this the best I can. It does begin with you and healthy emotional beliefs. So I work with a lot of hurlers, and hurlers cause damage. So first, when someone's in the hurling mentality, I really suggest you treat them like they're drunk. In other words, you don't try to have conversations with a drunk person. You don't say, hey, go get in a car and drive. They aren't capable of rational thinking. And so you wait till the hurling's done. Because what happens in the ADHD brain is if you start to go, don't talk to me like that, the hurler's like, oh, yeah, that's more energy. That's more fire for me to breathe. I was working with a husband who would come through the door and just be a hurler to his wife who asked about the broken screen door. And when I confronted him on it and said, this simply is not okay, he's like, well, she should know. And that's anytime you hear she should know or you should know not to talk to me in that state, that is a boundary that you need to think about having that, no, you shouldn't know. He should be or she should be responsible for her emotions. So now I can hear people going, but how? You cannot control the other person. You can't teach them and you can't help them. I really strongly suggest finding an ADHD coach, a therapist, and an ADHD informed therapist, someone who can help the person learn to take responsibility for his or her emotions. And so that is really the key here. In the meantime, you see the hurler, you identify the behavior, you don't argue with behavior in the moment. Afterwards, you return and say, by the way, that hurling, that hurts me when that happens. Sometimes the hurler is going to be so ashamed. Sometimes it's not going to go well. And if it doesn't go well, that's where you bring in the professional for that. So be very clear on your own emotional beliefs. Watch for codependent behavior because that's where I see a lot of really, we're just going to avoid her trigger here. We're going to do that. No, my number one rule is we trust grownups to be grownups, and grownups manage their own emotions.
Okay. The next one is we're kind of moving into some of the questions about catharsis. And I just have to share one of my favorite comments was from a listener who said she was also an English teacher and that she used to describe the word catharsis as an emotional bowel movement. Yes. I'm sorry if that offends anyone, but I thought that was absolutely perfect. So
I wanted to say that too. So whoever wrote that, thank you. I have been censoring myself. I put vomit on there, but that's exactly what a catharsis is like. And so thank you. Thank you, listener, for adding that.
So one that we got from both teachers and students who feel big emotions in the midst of a class. Do you have any ideas for catharsis that would not disrupt others and their own ability to sort of carry on with life in the moment?
Okay, I want to be clear. So the teachers are having big emotions or their students?
The teachers, in some cases, adult teachers with ADHD, who, as you can imagine, are tested in all kinds of ways during the day. And then separately, we also did get questions from some high school and college students who are themselves recognizing that they are having emotional flare-ups during class. And they're looking for ways, basically in public, how can you not let how can you
absolutely. So we always go to breathing for the first one, right? And so the slow deep breath in and out through the nose is the best to start with. In this case, I didn't get into this in the presentation, but I kind of think of emotions as hot or cold emotions. So the hot ones are like the explosive kind of ones. Those are where you're going to lose your stuffings, right? That case, try to get out of the situation as fast as possible. Go to the bathroom, put your hands under cold water, especially your wrist. That is amazing how it can reset your brain pretty quickly. Okay, don't resort to pinching yourself or biting your lip or anything like that. Try to use like cold water, an ice cube, something like that. If they're the kind of cold emotions, like that sinking, gross, anxious feeling, again, I go to the breathing, I change the posture, and a lot of times I will do self-havening. Self-havening is when this is overly simplified, you cross your arms and you could pat yourself. You can do that and still kind of look okay just by crossing your arms, and you just gently rub at your elbows. And so that's kind of a way out, really you're hugging yourself, but no one really needs to understand. If I'm starting to get tense and I just want to jump in to a conversation, I will actually put all my 5 fingertips together, and feeling my 5 fingertips together and just letting my hands rest like that, it's very calming. So find ways to kind of reconnect your head and your body.
Excellent. Very helpful. I'm going to read this one from one of our listeners because it's an interesting nuance. She wrote, when do you know when to express your emotion to the person if you feel affronted, or when to manage that emotion? She said, I've stuffed things down for years and lost my voice. I'm now trying to find the balance.
Yeah. Isn't that, I'm sorry that happened to you. That happened to me too. And so I want to point out, though, you're drawing a false dichotomy there. It's not one or the other. It's both. So you're saying, hey, I either have to express it or stuff it. I want you to manage and then express. And so there's times I want you to think, like you're like, whoa, I'm really upset about this. Take a moment, manage it, and then think about how you can express it. So let's say your husband comes home and he was just an idiot and said something like, your new jeans just look bad. He wasn't thinking. It was just, and that really hurt you. So what you want to do is go, okay, this really hurt me. I feel like crying about this. And so you're going through the catharsis, and the catharsis might just take 5 minutes. And then when you're calm, you can go, hey, honey, I need to tell you, when you gave me that feedback, that actually hurt my feelings. And so that's how you regain your voice back. You're empowering yourself to feel the emotion, letting it out, but then you're expressing it in a healthier way.
Okay. And we have, I'm going to try and fit in one more question that was very prevalent, and that was about repairing. This was a theme that really did hit home. And there's one question I think that reflects many viewers today. A mother who says she's a hurler. She knows it's harmful. She's made a lot of progress, but she's still not clear what needs to happen to repair. So she gave the example that, she says I lost it on my teenage daughter after she was rude, eye rolling, muttering under her breath. I can usually stay present and address this with her, but I just started hurling. Now I don't know how to repair that.
Love that question. I'm sorry, but I'm sorry for your experience. Thanks for asking it. I have 4 daughters of my own, so I may have lost my stuffings once or twice in my life, and you just feel miserable because you love your kids so much and you want the best for them. Here's why it's important to repair. And this person's saying, hey, I know it's important, but it is important to repair because we're modeling for our children how to repair with us. And so it goes something like this. Hey, I lost my stuffings on you. And that's not fair, because even though you were behaving like that and I was frustrated, that's not okay for me to do that to you. And so we're going to set aside your behavior for a second. And I just want you to know, I'm sorry. I really work hard at being a good mom to you, and I love you. And that's not how I want you to experience me. And then I personally would wait about a half an hour before I pick up on the child's behavior. Otherwise, it just gets into the same old match.
Okay, well, I might steal that one. I have the terrible news that we are out of time for today, but I do want to thank you, Dr. Rosier, and the Attitude audience for joining us today and for everyone contributing their voices to this conversation. I hope that if you're listening, you will join us next week for our free webinar, which will be on insights into the ADHD brain with Jeff Copper. And to make sure that you don't miss any future Attitude webinars or articles or research updates, you can sign up for our free newsletters at attitudemag.com/newsletters. So thank you, everyone. Please join us again. And thank you, Dr. Rosier, for this really helpful conversation.
Thanks for having me.